Welcome to And It's Live, the podcast which dives deep into football's most iconic seasons, stories, and what ifs. If you love football, history, tactics, and nostalgia, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell, and drop us a like on YouTube so you don't miss an episode. Hello and welcome to the main event, the history of the Champions League as we reach 2008-09. An interesting Champions League season as always, but one that maybe sets the football history on a different axis. To get into all of that, goals galore, drama, and one fucking disgrace, it's Mr. Adam Thornton. How are we doing?
Am I the disgrace? Just for clarity, I'm not. Was that an intro for me? Yeah, I'm good.
Never.
I'm looking forward to this. As we just said off air, I've probably got 2 hours worth of words on Barcelona alone this season. So apologies if I bore anyone, but it's coming.
Ever since Ajax fell off the edge of the world in this series, Adam's just been waiting for 08-09. I'm waiting for next season. Davey, how we doing?
It's the end of the Middle Ages.
Yes, indeed.
It's here comes the Renaissance, and it's exactly that. Yes, if Ajax were the ancient Greeks and the Romans and the Egyptians, and José Mourinho and Rafa Benitez were the Dark Ages, then yeah, bright new dawn and football that we are still heavily influenced by. You will not watch a game in any division on the television where you do not see things that became fashionable's not right. Fashionable is something that people play around with. This is epoch defining, and as I say, we're sitting here now 16 years later from the start of this season, almost 17 years later from the start of this season, and it has embedded itself in, we're talking about the most influential team this century easily, and this is their period.
It certainly is, and we'll get into all of that, and Davey and I might get a word in at some point. The qualifiers, no surprises really, apart from one, which we all know about in Lithuania, but the less said about that, the better. And we'll kick off as we always do then with Group A. As Roma, Chelsea beaten finalist Bordeaux, and the Champions League does this. I think European football has always done it for kids or people just getting into the game. It throws up teams you've never heard of, and here we have Cluj of Romania, and everyone going, yeah. I mean, I was into my football at this time, Adam, and really was able to devote quite a lot of time and was reading World Soccer and everything. But even I had to go, who the fuck are Cluj? But they did make a mark, as we'll talk about in a moment. This group.
Yeah, I was the same, and I think just afterwards, Unaria Urziceni appeared, which maybe didn't help that. Oh, there's another team that we've not heard of from there as well. So yeah, no, I was the same, but they do have some success. I think you could say there's a again a wee bit of foreboding there in terms of these teams appearing. And we spoke about it 15 years ago and more episodes than I care to count ago in terms of the sort of Iron Curtain of Spartak Moscow and all those, and you're like, what are we really going to get here? And we said that those days would be gone. This sort of is an exception to that rule, I think, because you're spot on. They appear, obviously they have to do the jump through the hoops, etc. to get there, but they appear, and it's a really tough group for them, which is a bit of a shame. I think, because it would have been nice to get them through. They were, like you said, that type of team that you know what you don't know what you're going to get, but you do in a way because of how you know they're going to be organised, all that sort of stuff. You know, they're no mugs. One of those ones that Rangers would in the 90s and probably later just completely underestimate and end up being battered 3-0 home and away against is the best or worst analogy I can bring for them.
Yeah, but you're spot on there when you say us, as maybe not to our English listeners quite so much, but Scottish listeners will know what we mean when we say these are the sides that come across and they're technically on such a high level that they can all play it doesn't matter if Batty Borisov's another one in this era. They come along and you don't know the name, but they can play. The technical level is there. It's not physical football. And the amount of sort of Scottish teams in particular over the last 20 years that go into these matches and look as though, and to be fair, some of the English teams, that qualify unexpectedly, perhaps, your Hull City or Burnley or whatever that qualify for Europe, they get a bit phased by it because these sides cannot play, and it's just an inherent basic that they do on the continent a lot better than we do, and it's an encouragement of people need to be able to pass the ball, they need to be able to control the ball, they need to be able to find a teammate rather than relying on brute strength.
And what those limited British teams need to have success in Europe is the crowd being on absolute top form. It's a big game, everyone's excited, and it's just impossible to be excited for that kind of name. And then it turns out actually they're
very good.
It's annoying, yeah.
They are the worst ones, and as the three of us are Rangers supporters. As Rangers supporters, we've seen it a lot where a team comes, the crowd aren't. I remember Maribor in 2011-12 were like that. Who are these? We've never heard of this mob. Therefore, and they come from. You automatically, I think, ascribe some respect to Spanish or German, or whatever, even if you haven't heard of them too much. But no, and they come and you think, my goodness, they're all on a higher technical level than our squad. So I thought they were really entertaining in their group Cluj. They had a real go. They had a great start, and you began to think, my goodness. And then, the big boys sort of asserted their dominance a bit. But even in those matches, most of the matches, they were competitive.
Sure were. David, Chelsea runners-up by the barest of margins, obviously, last season, with that interim management of Avram Grant. They're not going to, do that again. There'll be no caretakers in the future because Chelsea have made a big choice in the summer with World Cup winning manager Big Phil Scolari, with him Deco, José Basingua as well. Already a bit of a Portuguese influence there already. And Brazilian as well. I think there's a couple of Brazilians there by that point. It kind of made sense, David. Big ticket manager. I guess the big question was club experience at this level. Plenty in South America, of course, but it was an interesting, exciting appointment, a lot of anticipation. But even at parts of this group stage, it was probably clear this was going to be an experiment that didn't last too long.
Yeah, I don't like appointing managers to club game based on what they've done at international level because I think it's so different. And then when you're bringing in a manager who had not worked or played in the league at all, and I don't want to sound too Paul Merson and say, they have to know the league, but the red flags were slightly up. Do you remember when England went for him? And he said, I'm not doing it because of the press. They went and they took photographs of him when he was eating, and he what the hell is this? And I think that's your first thing of, well, there's a cultural thing here. But in terms of a name, here was a manager that England had gone for and not got. He was very attractive. And of course, he was World Cup winner. He had the huge personality, Scolari. And you thought maybe, certainly the World Cup winning, and he was very well known, and he has that authority that certain managers, Andreas Villas-Boas, were looking at you, didn't have at Chelsea that was essential. You thought he wouldn't go through that, but yes. I know, God love him, with his John Terry sitting in economy class while youth players are in the first class until Terry and Lampard and Drogba were sent to say no. We're sitting in the front, they're sitting in the back. But that's for later days. It's a good squad. I mean, it's a really good squad, and we witnessed the year before that this is a squad that could self-motivate and could deliver very high level performances and make. One of the things I like about this Chelsea team, Martin, is their ability to make in-game tactical switches themselves rather than this. I don't want to sound like an old man shouting at the clouds, but increasingly I look at sides who are reluctant or unable to do that and seem to require a half time.
David, go back to episode 1 of this series, 92-93. Barcelona come a cropper against CSKA Moscow because they lose one goal, then they lose another at home, and players don't know what to do because things aren't really going their way, and they have to adjust. And daddy's on the sidelines, and it's pretty difficult. We know we're going to speak about this season as well. Plenty of others to come. This core, you're absolutely right. They can manage themselves. They can change tactically in the game, and that is the Mourinho influence, I guess. That those foundations are laid. He can go. Other managers can come and go after that. But it's a framework, I suppose, that's there, and just these tougher players with the ability to just mix things up. They start well. Adam beat Bordeaux 4-0. They draw in Romania. They beat Roma, so everything's pretty tidy. 7 points out of 9. Then they lose in Rome. Can only get a draw in France, and need a late Drogba goal to beat Cluj at home, just to sneak through. But it's Roma that top the group. Spalletti still there? Is we still in that era around this time?
Yeah, we are. They do quite well this year. Just on the Chelsea point, first of all, I guess the Scolari thing, I completely agree with what David said around the international to domestic football, but across continents, I think, is an issue as well. Even now, I'm sure there's examples of international managers coming to European international managers coming to European domestic leagues and probably doing okay, and vice versa. We see players going earlier, or managers going earlier, I should say. Probably not too many huge examples I can think of that were good recently, but Tedesco, Martinez, etc. So we do see them sort of jumping back and forwards now, which we didn't really do probably back then. But I think the whole Brazil culture, South American, Brazil in particular culture, to then come to this was just a bit much, as mad as that sounds for somebody who's so experienced. But I think that probably bears out. And I think we're also starting to see those things that we discussed before around the player power at Chelsea. He obviously had a few Brazilians in there, like you mentioned, and Deco was there as well. But Deco was one of the ones that said that the players went to complain to Abramovich about Scolari, the lack of communication issues there. And there's an example, isn't it? I think it is this year, around where Drogba's out injured, and Anelka is playing up top as the 9, and he scores a load of goals at the start of the season. And then Drogba's back, and the manager was like, okay, well, I really want to get both of you in the team because Drogba's Drogba, and you're on fire at the minute. And he says, so Drogba's up top, and Anelka, you're on the wing. And he's like, nope, I'm not playing on the wing. I don't play on the wing. Just an example, I guess, of that at Chelsea, that there was an open line of communication direct to a chairman who would back all of these players over any manager. And I don't think that really helped him. The whole communication, not speaking the language, all that sort of stuff as well. Just, that way where if everything is fine and everything's taken in good faith, you can kind of get away with some of that stuff, I think, about, I don't speak the language, or this guy's my translator. If there's issues and what you've said can be taken in a couple of different ways, it's probably quite easy then for a player to go, actually, what are you doing? Why did you say that? Or I thought you meant this, or I thought you meant that. And it just sort of sows bad seeds. So, yeah, I think Hiddink comes in, I'm sure we'll come on to, and is exactly what they need at that point in time, as is sort of always the case, I think, moving from one extreme to another. I don't really necessarily mean tactically or anything like that, but even personality-wise, Scolari's breathing fire, and Hiddink's just a bit calmer.
Players love them. And that is something in this era, because they were pining always for their lost love, their squad. I think everybody knew that. Hiddink was the only stepfather, I think, that they ever really took to.
And Ancelotti. So, but very, very similar, right? Just these two.
Avuncular.
We have this conversation quite a lot. Coaches versus managers come in, and Ray Wilkins, guys like that just kicking about that team that just keep thinking, look, these are brilliant players. And they've, you mentioned, David, they're very tough. They've got a core running right through them. How do we just keep this ticking along? How do we just kind of keep them moving? And yeah, we will talk about Hiddink, because who doesn't love Hiddink?
You've
Joining
got to
the
love
party
Hiddink.
and just having his wee Wembley moment and stuff like that. Nearly had a bigger one, which of course we'll come to. But sorry, Adam, Roma. Again, just they've got a nice little bit of consistency, except when they meet Manchester United right enough. But they've got a thing going on, I guess.
Yeah, again, it's weird because in your head, or in my head, probably you think, okay, they won that Scudetto closing in on 10 years ago now, and then did nothing. And yeah, fair enough. But you sort of look at the team. Again, we've spoken a lot on here about the decline of Serie A. You can sort of see it starting to come through if we look at that 3-1 win in Rome with Panucci and Vucinic. Panucci getting 1 and Vucinic getting 2. It's a really tidy team. It's got attacking fullbacks. It's got decent defenders, if not great. Couple of really good players in midfield. Totti's still there, doing really, really well. So there's a real solidity to it. And we know Spalletti is that guy. We know he's tactically flexible. I think he's still, again, David mentioned earlier on, defining eras. The fact that some of these managers weren't rookies at this point and are still going sort of 15 years later at the highest levels, I think is great. And it's definitely something that we should analyse and we should look at and say, well, this longevity, everything changes, completely everything changes, players change, coaching changes, fitness changes, but still you've got these managers that evolve and adapt time and time again, even if they're not the guys that are at the absolute top of the game all the times, like Ancelotti. The level below are still working and learning and adapting. I think Spalletti's a great example of that. To come back into here, I think that game is really, really important for them. Bordeaux have a decent season. They've got Juan Gourcuff, who I loved on Football Manager.
Yeah.
He had a bad sort of spell. I think when he was at AC Milan, it didn't really quite go to plan for him. And he comes back to Bordeaux on loan, or he comes back to France, I should say, on loan, and he has a really good season this year. So he's popping up with those goals. He would go on and have a decent-ish time at Lyon, just at the sort of tail end of their period, but he's popping up here with a couple of decent goals. So it was sort of in the mix a little bit, but then I think that win that they get sort of just supercharges it a little bit, coupled with the fact that Bordeaux go and get a draw with Chelsea in the next game. I think that just probably sees Roma through, but well deserved. And yeah, I think not much in there outside of De Rossi and Totti and players like that you would say that are undisputed superstars, but just a really well molded, well balanced team that would sort of give anybody a go on their day, as they proved.
This is the best version of Julio Baptista that I saw apart from at Sevilla. And he had moments at Arsenal, less at Real Madrid. He didn't really fit Real Madrid. But they used them here in the way that Sevilla used them, which is we would like something a bit different. And I think that Wenger wanted to do that. He will be strength and power. I've got 84 number 10s, but never really trusted it and ran back to it. But I think he wasn't always in the side, but he gave them another option. And therefore, if you like, the fated plan B, they had that physicality that they could use if they needed to do so. Because they had, as Adam's just listed, there are some wonderful footballers. But they now also had somebody. So they had the option in matches to say, right, we can shut a game down with him. We can use him as an outball. We can get runners, etc. Basic, but it works because, let's face it, although he was big and physical, he could play. We are not talking, a guy who the ball bounced off when it went up to him. He could get involved. So I thought they used him quite cleverly because they have a very good manager.
That's a good point on Wenger, I think, and Baptista, just to segue a little bit. Wenger is many, many things, but he's not stupid or ignorant. Like, he will know that, in theory, having a player like that would be really, really useful to him. The two conflicting doubts I think in my mind that he might have is, I don't want to use a player like that because it goes against everything that I like.
It's immoral.
Yes, or simply I don't quite know anymore how to get enough out of that player without breaking up this jigsaw. How many times have we seen? We'll come on to a very, very pertinent example next summer with Barcelona, where you think could really do with something else here.
That's the key one, and it's the same thing. It's I don't trust this now. I've got it, and we're going to have an example of it on this show. Liverpool, Robbie Keane, exactly that. £20 million. Out goes Rafa Benitez and says, "Look, I need someone. I know we're all about control, but I need a guy who can play off the cuff. We don't have that." Signs one and then goes, "I can't control him. He loses the ball a lot. I don't want this," and doesn't play him.
It's an abstract idea that makes sense in these guys' heads. It would be good to have something like that, but in the training ground and come match day, they don't know how to utilise that gift.
And they run back to the guys who do what he wants them to do. Yeah. And Liverpool play lesser players than Robbie Keane because he would do things. And I mean, he's been signed to do things, but who plays Dirk Kuyt? Because Dirk Kuyt will do exactly what a manager tells him to do. And yeah, I just thought though that Roma did say, well, if you're playing, it means we're doing something different because Spalletti isn't quite as way. I mean, he has his ways of playing, obviously, but he's not quite as wedded to this is the only way this side will play.
So Roma getting the better of English opposition in the group. It's just the knockouts that are a bit of a problem. Hope they don't draw anyone from England next time. Group B has Inter, Adam, and José's back. He's back in business. He's in Milan now. With, I guess, not quite a free run at Scudetti, but close as damn it. Inter have the whip hand. They have the structural power, with others still very much licking their wounds after Calciopoli. It made perfect sense. They had won, of course, hadn't they? They had won the league before he went there, but the European Cup, or the Champions League, of course, as it is now, has been a dream of Marathi's for some time, and they haven't won it since the 60s. It's a kind of now a switch in focus. Now they've got the league back, and it looks like they'll have the league for quite a wee while. So I guess this is a kind of perfect situation for Mourinho. Big club, bit of money, but still with players who will bend to his will because he said, "I've won one of these, you haven't. Do what I say, and we will."
Yeah, I think it's a perfect storm as far as he's concerned, because it is big enough that you can go toe-to-toe right away with teams that you've been playing over the last five years or so, but also not the biggest domestic challenge. Roma run them relatively close the year before, but this year it's 10, 12 points, I think it is, from Juventus, who are back up. So yeah, but I guess it nearly never happened as well, which I think we should probably cover. And David mentioned that defining era happening right now and potentially still going, but like I said, it nearly never happened for all the Barcelona Mourinho issues, public displays of we hate this guy, we hate you. No, I hated you first. You're just a translator. It was between him and Guardiola for the job this summer when Rijkaard goes. Now, obviously, after it, Barcelona reject claims that they've spoken to him, but they absolutely did speak to him. This year, he went in, I think, and did his whole Mourinho thing. And from what I remember, or what I've gathered, was the board were pretty split on that. They think, okay, we need someone as Barcelona do, and it's something we've just discussed there with Wenger. Barcelona aren't afraid of going in the complete opposite direction when what they're doing isn't working or is getting a bit stale. What I would say is every time they do it, it gets absolutely worse. But that's by the by. It's like one of those things. They're brave enough to actually go and do it, and then everything that Wenger thinks might happen actually does happen to them, and worse, because they've strayed away from their ideals and they go running back. So they're in that sort of cycle. Now, we've spoken about before the Cruyff years in the 90s, a little bit of down cycle or trying to go that way with random managers, and then Rijkaard sort of pulls them back round a little bit, but not quite. So they're now at the stage, do we sort of keep going with the Rijkaard and evolve back into the full sort of total football, or do we go the other way? And again, how often have we said what are clubs doing when they've got two managers who are absolute polar opposites in style, personality, experience, all that sort of stuff, and that's your final two? That is a club that doesn't know what they're looking for, doesn't know where they are. They're at a crossroads. So football history could have been very different. It would have been interesting. Obviously, with Mourinho, you'd go in and it would be highly entertaining for 2 or 3 years, but the longevity aspect, not so much. So yeah, I think
I know what you mean there. We do see clubs like that. Sorry to cut in, but I just want to kind of drill into this one. We see clubs all the time now either go from one extreme manager to the next. We know they're speaking to two managers that are completely different, and I think it's a perfectly fair criticism. You don't know what you're doing. Is this not slightly different? The Guardiola's already there with the B team, right?
Yep.
So he's in with the Bricks. He's clearly a club stalwart. So that and his style will fit that ethos, and that's clearly going to be a consideration. It's clearly going to where they want to go. But they can't ignore Mourinho, can they, really, at this moment in time? With what he's done, he has some kind of connection there before. As a professional outfit, they have to at least hear the presentation, hear the spiel, at least consider it. I'm not convinced that it is as so many clubs are, so many club owners are who don't know what they want. And that's why you get a lot of swinging about. He's at this point in 2008, he is not a man that you can just dismiss from the conversation because he wanted the job.
Yeah, I think ultimately, I guess you're right that it's that thing about the problem. Both of them could solve the problem, I guess. And the problem, as far as we know, or as far as we've read or been told, you never know what version of the truth you're getting. But the problem was Rijkaard was too nice, essentially, and lots of great players in there, but work ethic, professionalism, desire, all that sort of stuff could be better, I think. So it's who can solve that problem. Fine. Mourinho absolutely can come in and solve that problem. Like we said, it'll be 18 months, 2 years, and then it'll be a whole host of different problems and more problems along the way. But is there someone else there who can solve that main problem, but give you tick more of the other boxes that you want as well? And I think that's probably what it comes down to. Cruyff is still kicking about in the background here as well. I imagine he would have had quite a big sway on it, and I don't imagine Cruyff being a Mourinho guy at all. So maybe it comes down to something as simple as that. But you're right, polar opposites, but capable of solving the same problem. I think probably sums that up fairly well. But yeah, I love this Inter team as well. Complete opposite of everything that everything he kind of had at Chelsea as well. I think a little bit. We spoke about how maybe didn't get the credit for being as attacking there. He didn't have huge amounts of physicality on the wings or anything like that. That changes it. Changes it Inter big time.
He had it in the defence. My God, 4 bastards at centre.
Yeah.
Even people remember Maicon correctly as a astonishing attacking fullback. He was as hard as nails, and that lot were almost a throwback. They could all play, Lucio, Walter, Samuel. They were all modern defenders, but none of them had any compunction whatsoever about savagely assaulting someone if it would help them get 3 points. I think they fit into Mourinho's, Martin's oft stated, I don't get to coach men anymore. I used to have real men. I think he always goes back to his Porto, Chelsea and Inter teams when he talks that way.
He loved this team and this club, and we'll get to it, of course, in due course. He had to take the job that he did, and he had won what he was there to win. Spoiler, not this season, but but I think he really did love this group of players because they would bend to what he
as well, yeah.
Do, but still be tough. But still be tough.
I love this group as well because also here's the other thing after the whole Barcelona thing, right? Inter were desperate for him. They turned up when he turned up there. It was like, honestly, it was like when Maradona went to Naples. That was the reaction he got. he was an absolute god there, and I think he needed that. The fallout at Chelsea, then not getting that, I think he needed that. But my goodness, you're right, those players responded to him. And let's not forget, we're going to talk a lot about Samuel Eto'o this week at Barca. You get Samuel Eto'o running up and down the wing, like,
effectively
his
full
life.
back in it.
Yeah. And the buy-in he gets from this lot is absolutely sensational. I love this team. I thought they were great. They were fun to watch. They had a glamorous Eastern European. They tick a lot of my boxes.
Adriano, the big signing, Adam, is he?
Yeah. Yeah, he was. I think it's funny you mentioned Mike on there. That reminded me of that story. I think I probably sent it on to both of you. It wasn't all about the sort of fear and being in awe or anything. Obviously, players being players will still take their chances with anything, I guess. But there's that story of Maicon, similar to, is it Neymar would always get suspended or be injured over Carnival or something like that. There's a similar one with Maicon that season where he said, I remember a game in Siena with Maicon. They said he always got a fifth yellow card to be suspended at Christmas so he could go back home to Brazil for vacation. I went to him, this is Mourinho, I went to him and said, if you got that yellow card, you're not going to go on vacation. I'm not an idiot. And he said, if I score as a right back, if I score, can I go on vacation? He's like, no, you need to score 2. He scored 2 goals, then received a yellow card for taking his shirt off, so he'd be booked anyway, and he went on vacation, and I gave him an extra week off. I think that's just a great story that he got himself booked anyway, but yeah.
It's exactly that. It's total buy-in, and it's trust, though. It's trust that, you can go and do that, because it won't upset the rest of the squad. They'll find it funny as well, and I know you'll come back, be ready to go. And what you do get in 2010, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but you do get throughout this period a squad like that Chelsea squad who would run through brick walls for him, and he never has it again, I would argue. But
no, I would agree. I would agree, because obviously the Madrid stuff will come to is not, the balance isn't quite where it was there. You've not got players that are completely in awe.
In awe of you.
This was Adriano's last season with Inter, like you said there, Martin, and I think obviously we spoke about that decline there. Goes back to Brazil for a bit, comes to Roma, and then there's not really very much else happening there. But in terms of calling out some of those other key players, I guess, for Inter, you've got Ibrahimovic, obviously, who will definitely come on to the year after. He finished his top scorer this year. Cambiasso, and another one that
we very much a Mourinho lieutenant, eh?
But also one of those guys that you're like, oh, that's not to be patronising, but good that he's got that role and that success now, because he was one of those guys at Madrid that was like very underrated and all that sort of stuff. So that was really useful. Zanetti, I don't think we really need to say much about Zanetti, just your classic Italian style defender, even though he's not from there, but he's been there long enough that he's probably naturalised, just play everywhere, captain, exactly someone like Mourinho would need. Walter Samuel was mentioned as well, even like guys like Suleiman Tari, Stankovic still kicking about, Julio Cesar, they were all huge for him. And these teams, they all were great players on their own, like you said. They all worked together perfectly, and each of the units worked together, I think, as well. That defence was ridiculous, and those strikers that will obviously come on and speak about in great detail over the next couple of years, like your Militos and Eto'os, and obviously Ibrahimovic. Players that you might not think, certainly in Ibrahimovic's case, might work with other players, but he just managed to get them moving. And yeah, I think they were a terrific team. Like I said, right at that time, I was right in my Barcelona era, and it maybe was a bit all the Barcelona and stuff. I was like, well, do I like them? Do I not? But they were great. They were like a proper Italian throwback for me.
Yeah, and the last hurrah really for Serie A in this competition. We will come on to that in a few weeks, obviously, but the transfer activity in the summer of 2009 was about as perfect a summer as it's probably possible to get, and that throws everything forward to quite a remarkable year. But that is way down the field. We should mention Inter did not win.
They do not win this group, no, because there is a very, very good Greek side who are there.
Of course there are.
Who are marshalled by a well-kent face, to use a Scottish term, Gilberto Silva. is there, and they have some other good players as well. Champ manager 97-98. People will remember the wonderful Mikael Nielsen. He's there. He's doing well, and everyone will remember Karagunis from Greece's heyday at that time. They had a couple of lightning fast Greek wingers as well, and they were a very effective side. And again, I slept on it at the time. I need to apologise to the country of Greece, because for 15 years or so, you've been quite reliable in the Champions League, and I never paid you a blind bit of attention, and I do apologise for that. This is a good side. This is a really good side, and they do tend to chuck money at big-name players who are coming to the end of their career, and a lot of the time it doesn't work, like Turkey. Similar to Turkey, although the Greeks actually pay them, even if they don't play well. But Gilberto Silva is one of the ones who goes and does excellent, slower pace of game over there. Still is intense, obviously, but they're a very effective side. They know their strengths. They're very, very well marshalled by the big man, and yeah, this is a good achievement topping this group, by the way.
This is Panathinaikos, listeners. In case
my apologies.
Who this side is. But yet again, by the way, and I think we mentioned this in when we looked at the group stage last season, possibly the season before, their start's horrific. They lose the first two. They've managed to get a point in the middle round at home to Werder Bremen. And then they won the final three. Inter are kind of opposite. Inter start pretty strongly. Some silly draws. But then they lose. They contrive to lose their final two games. So Bremen are the other team. And Anorthosis Famagusta. Good to see them finally make the Champions League after so many attempts at getting there. But they brought up the rear. But yeah, Inter go through in second place. Costly as it always is.
Always is.
And with Panathinaikos through is group winners. And right next door, because as you mentioned, Adam, this whole interview process, football tour. I mean, Jonathan Wilson's book on this is great reading, because Mourinho is basically furious now for the rest of his career. But this new look Barcelona are in a group with Sporting, Shakhtar Donetsk, and Basel, depending on which part of Switzerland you come from. It could have been a lot harder, I think it's probably fair to say. But this new era with Guardiola, no Ronaldinho, no Deco, they're gone. The party boys are away. Oliver Cromwell is in charge. This is going to be football puritanism at its best, Adam. And there was a bad start from memory. They don't lose maybe the first couple of games in La Liga, and a lot of questions about, B team manager and, this absolute giant of football management, celebrity at the time anyway, in terms of Mourinho flying about. Have they become too pure? Well, they'll get into the stride here, I guess.
They do. Yeah, I think there's two games that you're probably referring to against Numancia and Racing Santander that they don't win. They lose the first game, and it's one of those brave new dawns, and you lose the first game, which really should be a gimme, and everybody's like, "Oh, what's going on? What's going on here? Why is this happening to us?" But I think from then on, I think they're unbeaten until March, I want to say, in the league.
11.
Thereafter. So yeah, it's the batterings of Real Madrid absolutely help. The battering of Atletico Madrid, all the goals are flying in other games as well. I think they score 5 or 6. I think they score 6 goals 5 times potentially, maybe 6 times in the league, and twice against Real Madrid. There's a 6-0 early on, which obviously really helps them out, and then the 6-2 in the Bernabeu right at the end, which I think it was one of those things. It's probably always going to be fine, even if you narrowly lose everything in terms of leagues, etc. If you're managing to do that, given how things are there. So don't want to just ramble on for an hour about Guardiola, so I'm sure we can sort of thread it through. But I think
I've made a cup of tea, so wire in.
I think the big things I would like to get across is, I guess, some of the major criticisms. Now, there is a part of me that thinks we discussing Guardiola on a retro football podcast or show is a bit odd. I know we are currently planning to stop this Champions League show in the summer of 2014, so we're not going to quite see him at Manchester City. I think that's way too close for me, even though it is 10 years. But there is an element, I guess, of, as David said, he's still here just now. And to be honest, myself included, we are bored, I guess, of the whole positional play. Tiki-taka isn't really a phrase that we use anymore, and I'm maybe going to explain my thoughts on that over the couple of years as we go. But I think we're probably just bored of the general concept. We're probably potentially bored of teams just copying each other and trying to play in this way. We see some examples regularly of teams in 8th, 9th, 10th divisions of leagues trying to play in this way and just completely failing at it. There's an ideologue everywhere, I guess, that thinks they'll be able to get teams to do that. So in a way, it is good that it's impacted so many people and it's such a huge legacy. But at the same time, if I'm fed up of it as someone who loves that, I'm sure there's plenty other listeners who are fed up of it as well. So I think that's a key point to get out there. What I would also say is Pep Guardiola's teams now, it absolutely is not just the same thing over and over again, that he's never changed and never evolved. I've always railed against that. He evolved dramatically from his time in Man City. I think at the start to where it was in the middle to where it is now, it's completely different in terms of how they play. The core principles, etc., will absolutely be the same, but even in terms of the physical makeup of the players that he gets, the fact that he's got centre forwards that he would always rail against before, he's got defenders where before he was lucky if he even had one centre half that he would play, and he probably wouldn't allow them to head the ball. That's when Mascherano, etc., would come back the way. So many things I think have evolved in there, and I would rail against anyone who says it's just the same thing over and over again. The second thing that I'd probably rail against is just buying your way to it or getting lucky because you've got Messi. I think if you ask Messi whether that's the case, I think he would rail against that as well. If it was so easy, I think more people would be doing it. If it was just a case of let's bring in a manager and give them loads of money, then we'll do it. The example I always come to is, for a period of time, I'm not sure what it is just now, but for a period of time, Man United outspent Manchester City on transfer fees. It is who you've got there, how you do it, all that sort of stuff that comes into it. It's not just about buying the best players and letting things work. Another thing that maybe is a shorter term thing that we can cover over the next couple of years is the whole Guardiola, Barcelona, Spain thing, and that it's boring. The Spanish style of it, I think, very quickly became boring. I would say I remember being in Barcelona in World Cup 2010. Was it Switzerland they played? I think David Villa might have scored. Was it the opening game potentially?
Switzerland beat them.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. And it was dull as anything. Absolutely horrific. And it was at that point I was like, this isn't... People are saying, oh, that's great because the players are there, that's fine, but you're missing a few key components. One which is the best player in the team, which is Leo Messi, and one which, in my opinion, was definitely up there. And the best players on the team was Dani Alves. So you're missing those two key components of a philosophy. Doesn't make it the same thing. So I always got bored. I got bored with Spain very, very early because it was just, let's get these little guys in and no pass. We've got no cutting edge. We've got no dynamism coming from deep or anything like that. So I would rail against the fact that they're quite similar and that it never changed, because this 2 or 3 years under Barcelona, under Guardiola for Barcelona, were absolutely electrifying. Attacking intent, yes, they would be patient at times, but counter-attacking, Pedro going in behind, Eto'o going in behind, Henry going in behind, I think they were the full package there. What it's evolved to, I think, is people being sick of it and pigeonholing it in a sense that, it's just passing it, possession for possession's sake. Not the case, I don't think, for me, certainly in the first 2.5, certainly, years of his time here. So yeah, I'm sure we'll thread it through over the next, whatever that will be, 10 shows that we're going to be covering Guardiola at Barcelona. Don't want to just do an onslaught right now, but that's I guess the couple of things that I disagree with, or things that I want to try and get across as we go through it.
The Spain thing's interesting because I struggle to think of a successful international team that had that counter response, I guess, when people just disliking it, and this is just so dull. The control they had of games was incredible. Just for the record, if my team could have control of games like that in the very top level for 6 years, I'd be all right with that. But I do know what you mean. Barcelona, a very, very different animal because of the key players you mentioned. He spent over 90 million euros in that first summer. Dani Alves being a key part of that. I mean, you get Alexander Hleb in there, Piqué, I suppose. Things obviously just didn't quite work out. Busquets being free, I think, and absolutely no bother, or just coming through Barcelona B and whatever else. That's the whole thing, isn't it? He did inherit incredible talent, but you have to use them and you have to supplement them where absolutely required. And Alves was such a dynamic part of that team. I know we want to move on, but
Alves was an obvious signing, and the idea that other clubs are saying, well, he had Dani Alves. Dani Alves had been banging that. I think he got 25 goals the year before for Sevilla. So Liverpool, Manchester United, he was right there. You could have got Real Madrid.
Yeah, they passed
you decided not to go with it. Pep was because we didn't at this point use fullbacks like that in the UK, and Pep did. The Messi thing, like if Arne Slot wins the league with Liverpool, will people say, but you inherited Mohamed Salah? Well, yes, but that's part of the attraction of going to a big club. I don't buy that argument at all. He had Leo Messi. Yes, he did, and look what he did with him.
I remember that I've quoted that a couple of times. I think maybe not on here. I don't know, but I've certainly mentioned it to Martin a few times. Round about this era for me was when I was just getting into Twitter. I think pretty much this year. Pretty much, I think Twitter was sort of kicking off, and you had all the Guardian journalists, and I feel like the Guardian was sort of at its peak at that point. There wasn't really much else out there in terms of football journalism that I was properly consuming at the big newspapers, etc. And I always remember Sid Lowe would be on the podcast for Football Weekly, and he'd phone in, and the connection would be terrible, and his dog was barking in the background.
Trains and all that.
Yeah, it would be awful. And I think he said it on the show, but he also said it in print as well, that the headline was, before sort of clickbaity headlines and these ways for engagement and all that was really massive. His headline was Dani Alves is the best player in the world, and then in brackets it was like, well, second best after Leo Messi. And it was one of those things that sort of stopped me in my tracks, because I was like, is a right back? What are you talking about? How can that be? How can that be a thing? But it just
whereas now, Adam, now we wouldn't. Of course, you're going to sign a fullback like that, but this is Pep. This is the influence. That's what I mean. And like I say, he'd been banging in goals and creating stuff and being almost a Trent Alexander-Arnold-esque playmaker for 3 years at Sevilla before this. Yeah. This was not new. He was there. He was available. It was Pep who then said, I'll be brave enough to come and do this at a major club, and got his reward for it.
So had there been a full-back quite like that, Adam? Again, a top, or used like that, should I say?
No.
Because we're so used to it now. Is this a game changer?
This is a game changer, I think, for me. Even Roberto Carlos and Maicon and Cafu, they're still all about power, I think. Whether it's the engine
got a lot of energy,
Cafu,
good engines, but
yeah, the engine of Cafu, the literal cannon of Roberto Carlos, and then Maicon having all of that sort of physical makeup to rampage. Dani Alves is relatively small, not very built, rapid, but it's the intelligence of it. I think most, as we're sort of coming on, as we've been sort of talking about throughout this decade, English football is just sort of starting to figure out that you might want players that can pass the football in the middle of the pitch, whereas Barcelona are now moving to where can I get more players that can pass the ball in places that they've never done it before. Do I need a target man? How about that wee guy there that can just slalom past people like nobody's business? Shall I put him in the right and have him cut inside and score? That seems like a more pertinent way of doing things. And by doing that, then I create this massive gap on the far right-hand side of the pitch. So what will I do? I'll get somebody who's just going to hammer the life out of that gap because the left-back's following Messi. So let me get somebody who can just hammer that and the ball drops to him. He can cross it in, he can hit the byline, he'll get back and defend, all that sort of stuff. It's just a part of the jigsaw, but it is that jigsaw. It's not just going to buy all these players and then I'll figure it out and see what happens. It's Messi plays here, he cuts inside. Dani Alves will go and attack that space. You'll have Xavi will cut out there and block, or you'll have Mascherano coming out. It's just all really, really well thought out and well structured. And that, I think, it can be the beauty of positional play, and it can also be that sort of robotic part of it as well, where that quote that we referenced about Henry saying I basically had to retrain my brain because I had to be in this square of the pitch at this certain moment. I wasn't allowed to be in the same vertical space as the right back or the midfielder, so I had to move laterally as well as trying to attack. And it can, I think, get a little bit robotic, but I think the freedom that he gave them in the final third, specifically in terms of once they got there, I think he's still saying that now. I'm sure was there a quick Kyle Walker after the Champions League final, him and Grealish. There was an interview with, it was either TNT or is it CBS, the one that Kate Abdo does, where they were saying like you need to, how you get to the final third, there's no debate. He said that's Guardiola says that this is what needs to happen. This is the automation or the routine or whatever, how you get there. But he did have a little bit of leeway in the final third to go and do his thing. And I think I can sort of see both sides. That people will be thinking, well, let them just play off the cuff. But that's all part of the beauty and all part of why he's been completely dominant, I think, over the last, what we at now, 17 years across 3 clubs. So yeah, I think there's elements of it that are off the cuff, but there's elements of it that are just heavily trained on the pitch. And I think Dani Alves probably, for me, represents, I would say, the best of both of that, as well as obviously Messi.
So Dani Alves, the hero of the hour. We'll probably just leave it at that in terms of his story. Listeners, I did say before we started recording, maybe we'll just do one episode on the groups this year because there's not a lot going on. 3 out of 8 done, and that'll do us for this week, I think. Cheers, David.
Pleasure as always, lads.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
We'll wrap them up next week with plenty of stories still to come. Until then, bye for now. If you enjoyed the show and want to help us grow, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. On YouTube, search for And It's Live Podcast. We've got new deep dives, drafts and breakdowns dropping every other day.